Last year, I found out about Kraken Week way towards the end of it, like the Thursday or Friday of it, and I thought it was super cool, and I wanted to make a video about my own Kraken-themed content. And I rushed out to make it. I made stats for everything. I made a Baby Kraken stat block in 4 different RPG game systems, but I couldn't release it in time. So I figured I'll just wait a year and I'll release it for Kraken Week next year. So that time has come again. So it is finally time to release the. Okay, well, I guess we're not going to release the Kraken ever then. Unless if this video gets a comment asking me to make a video on the Baby Kraken stats I made for Kraken Week. If I can get one whole comment, that would be enough for me to make a video on it. But instead, we're going to talk about dragons today. Who doesn't love dragons? The iconic staple of fantasy lore and storytelling. But there's a big problem with dragons. You see, they have all kinds of cool features here: breath weapons, claws, bites, tails. But it's these things that are the problem: wings. Now, it's not wings themselves that are the real problem. The problem is that wings mean that people assume they can fly. And the problem with flying is that you're going to have your fighters here with some really cool melee weapons, and they forgot to take a ranged weapon, so they're going to be charging up to the dragon, and the dragon's just going to fly up, breathe down breath weapon, and fly away. And then fly back, attack them, fly away. And this makes combat very difficult to run against a dragon. And maybe you want that for your dragons. Maybe you want them to be terrors that rule the skies that your melee combatants cannot fight because they were too foolish to buy a ranged weapon, like someone I know. But if you want a dragon that's a little more hand to hand and a little more on the ground, then I have a solution for you. Say hello to the Stone-Wing Dragon, also known as the Earthbound Dragon. These are dragons whose wings are too heavy for them, so they can't fly. But these strong, reinforced wings have allowed them to do new things, such as protect themselves from attacks and become a just tank of taking incoming damage. You can flavor these dragons a number of different ways. Perhaps a ancient ancestor of them angered a particular god that caused that dragon and all of its descendants to be robbed of flight, cursed with stone wings, that then through a series of evolution they used to adapt their bodies to a more defensive tank-like style. Perhaps these dragons are from the elemental plane of Earth, and you can add the Earth tag to them in the stats. However you want to use them, feel free to use these Earthbound dragons as brutal tanks that are reptilian nightmares that can charge and attack foes while protecting themselves. So, let's get into how these dragons run in 3 different RPG systems. Feel free to skip ahead if you're only interested in one of them. I may reference them a little bit back and forth, but you can listen to each part of the video by itself and still get the full context. Starting off with D&D 5th edition, we have a challenge rating 5 monster here. Large dragon, as you would expect. 17 AC, which is fairly high for something of that caliber, with its hit points sitting at 126, making it a beefy, bulky monster, with a 20 constitution to back it up. Its mental stats, as you'll see throughout these, are a little bit lower, with its intelligence just being an 8, being closer to a white dragon's level of intelligence. These things are bodybuilders with the brains of mush. Their saves are to strength and constitution. Again, not as common as most dragons have some wisdom or charisma saving throw bonuses. Not these things, they're all physical. One of the most important things, as we've covered, is that their speed is simply 30 feet, no fly speed. It's very tempting, given the flavor of these, to give them a burrow speed, but that leads us to the same problem of a dragon attacks, it burrows underground during its turn, nobody can attack it, comes up, attacks, and then burrows away. We don't want these hit and run tactics. We want these dragons to stand their guard. So no burrow speed, no swim speed, no fly speed, just 30 feet. You will notice that in the other systems that they actually move slower than what would be the default speed for those systems, but because moving is free in D&D 5e, it doesn't make as much sense to penalize them so heavily for their movement speed. when they can't take a double move and still attack as if they could in other systems. Its skills, just perception and intimidation. Again, they're not doing a whole lot. They really do like to scare people and want to counterbalance that low charisma and low wisdom, but that's about it. For resistances, I did give it a resistance to lightning. I don't like to throw on random resistances to monsters, but I felt it's very appropriate, them being very non-conductive, that they could have one kind of extra resistance, so I gave that to lightning. Immunities, frightened. These things are scary monsters. It's hard to frighten them. The senses that you would expect: blind scent, blind sight, dark vision, pretty low passive perception, so you could sneak past these things with a good enough rogue. Let's get into its actions. As always, it has a multi-attack where it can make one bite attack and two claw attacks. I was tempted to give this thing some kind of range attack, like a rock throwing attack, as you'll see it in the Pathfinder version. But again, I felt like that did not fit for the 5e version of it, so it will rely on its breath weapon for its range attacks. That breath weapon is a 30-foot cone that spews forth rocks and debris and deals bludgeoning damage. Perhaps controversially, I made this a strength saving throw to kind of push away the rocks being thrown at you. If you want to change this back to a dexterity saving throw or something like that, be my guest, but I wanted to make it a little bit different and really play into this really being a dragon to fight barbarians and fighters and high strength people with. But let's get to the most important part of the dragon: its reactions, the wing parry. Trigger: the dragon's hit by an attack roll. Response: the dragon adds 2 to its AC against that attack, possibly causing it to miss. This is a very common parry reaction that many NPCs have. The exception here, though, is that the dragon has 2 wings, so therefore it can use its wing parry twice per round, unlike the standard 1 reaction per round. So this will make it very annoying to hit. Also, a lot of times this parry kind of move only works against melee attacks, but I want to make sure that people can't just stand far away and pelt this thing with a bow, so this thing can do this against any kind of attack. It can shield itself. Finally, oh yeah, you'll notice that there's no frightful presence because this is a young dragon. Obviously, at higher levels, as an adult or ancient one, it would have a frightful presence, but I left that off for the young version here. Finally, it has a legendary action, and you might be thinking, wow, a legendary action on such a low-level monster? That's unusual. And it is, but you'll see that this is not a legendary action that lets it attack during someone else's turn or do some other kind of devastating effect. Instead, this is a very unique and original legendary action, not one that I've seen used at least. It only has one legendary action per round, so you don't need to worry about tracking 2 or 3 of them in the whole round, which can bog down combat and get confusing for a newer DM at such a lower level. It just has one, and that is the Wing Encase. So remember, a legendary action happens at the end of someone's turn, and then it can encase itself in its wings, protecting itself. And then until the end of the next creature's turn to act in that initiative, the dragon gains resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. So, say the cleric just cast a heal spell, and the next person up in the initiative is this fighter here with his two-handed weapon, and he's going to make a bunch of attacks, and it's going to deal a ton of damage. Before that fighter goes, this dragon can protect itself and encase itself in wings to take half damage from all of those attacks during its next turn. Perhaps this needs to be rewritten a little bit to avoid players being a little too clever with readying actions or delaying, but I felt for now this is a decent enough, unique, original kind of ability to have a defensive legendary action that only applies to one creature's next turn. Moving on now to Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You'll see here this is a level 7 creature. Um, Making it the weakest of the true dragons. They start at level 8. This will have a lot of similarities to the Horn Dragon and the Adamantium Dragon, as those are primal dragons that are level 8 and 9. But again, this lacks the flying ability, so it allows us to put its power budget in a few other places. I'm a bit newer to making Pathfinder monsters. I run a lot of monsters, but I'm a bit newer to writing them out. So I do feel like some of these numbers are a little bit on the lower end compared to the actual dragons. So feel free to apply a elite template to this if you feel this is not gonna bring enough umph and scariness to the party. But what I do have here, large dragon, primal, perception, decent, common draconic. This one has more skills. The Pathfinder dragons had a whole lot of skills, so I felt it was only appropriate to not jip this on skills. So athletics, intimidation, very high up, survival and nature are there, and then a dragon lore just to have some kind of lore skill. So quite a couple of skills, not as bad as some of the other versions of this dragon in different systems. It has a 6 con and a 5 strength, so again, very bulky and brutish, but a 0 dex, a 0 intelligence, so definitely a weak spot there with its wisdom being a 1 and its charisma being a 2. Its AC is 28, which is fairly high for being a level 7 creature, and its fort is plus 17. So again, it can shrug off poison and other fortitude saves quite easily. But that being said, its reflex is a 11 and its will is just a 10. So targeting this thing with will saves will be very effective. Its hit points are 131. Again, fairly bulky for its level. Immune to paralyze and sleep, so those won't work. Resistances, it just resists electricity 5. Again, just a very minor resistance to electricity. You can still hit this thing with a lightning bolt and deal a fair amount of damage, but it will take slightly less. Here we do have a frightful presence, so that is present for this version of the Stone-Wing Dragon. We're going to come back to the wing block reaction. It has a 20-foot speed here. Again, that is slower than the default, so this thing is a slow-moving creature. You might need to use 2 of your actions to just get close enough to someone. But there is something that kind of covers that weakness below with the charge ability. But before we get there, it does have jaws, claw, tail, all pretty standard attacks there. It does have a range action of being able to throw a random rock. This is something that many monsters have. It has Draconic Frenzy that most dragons have. Can make 2 claw strikes and 1 tail strike for 2 actions. And Draconic Momentum, which lets it recharge its breath whenever it scores a critical hit with a strike. Everything that you would expect to see on a dragon. Speaking of a breath weapon, we have the Debris Breath, pretty much what you would expect. Two actions for a 30-foot line. Again, we're going with a fortitude save here. If you want to change that to reflex, feel free, but I felt fortitude made sense to kind of be blocking out some of the rocks and toughing through the damage. Um, Unlike before, this is not just a basic save. This also has the ability to push people away. On a failure, the save will push them 5 feet back, and on a critical failure, it will push them 10 feet back, forcing characters to need to use more actions to move closer to the dragon to engage with it. As I mentioned, it has a charge ability. For two actions, it can charge. It can stride twice in a straight line and then make a jaw attack. As long as it's moved at least 20 feet, it gains a +2 circumstance bonus to its attack roll. This will make it a lot easier for it to get a critical hit and deal more damage. So trying to back away from this thing and kite this thing around could be problematic because it can just charge right in and deal a lot of damage. Let's move to its defensive capabilities. It can raise a wing for 1 action. This is very similar to Raise Shield. It gains a +2 bonus to its AC until the start of its turn. That is a untyped AC bonus, so it will stack with everything, including itself. Because it can do this twice per turn. It basically can raise shield twice because it has 2 wings. This will leave it with only 1 action to attack with, but if it needs to go full defensive, it can do this. When it does do this twice in 1 turn, it gets an additional reaction to use its wing block, which let's go back to wing block and take a look at that. So this is like the shield block ability, but because you're not going to break the dragon's wings and hardness is not going to really apply, it's a little bit different. If a creature makes a successful strike against the dragon after it's used raise wing on its turn, the dragon gains 5 resistance against the damage. So you can raise wing, protect yourself, use your reactions to block attacks, and then when you want to get more aggressive, you can throw rocks, bite people, charge in. So we have a full package here, and of course the debris breath as well. So I expect this dragon to play a lot switching between kind of a more offensive turn and a more defensive turn, depending on how long it wants to wait to let its debris breath recharge, how people are moving around the battlefield. Um, uh, so there's a lot of options here with this dragon. Again, no flight, so this will be quite the brute to face on the ground. And finally, we come to the newest game system, DC-20. Since DC-20 is still in its beta, I'm going to try to be basing this off mostly the 0.7 rules, as I wouldn't want to upset the dungeon coach by revealing the stuff that's in the later updates that I kickstarted and have access to. And also, as far as I know, I'm a little bit behind on some of the more recent updates in the past few months, but the example monsters have been mostly low level monsters, so this is a higher level monster for that game system, so it might not be fully accurate to how the final version will look. But if you are want a challenge for your DC-20 games, here is the Young Stone-Wing Dragon for DC-20. It's a large monster, a level 5 brute. It has 40 hit points, which is very good for a boss, but it also has one physical damage reduction, meaning that it will take a long time to bring this thing down to 0. But playing into that again, its physical defense is 16, which again is very high, but its mental defense is only 8. So if you can attack this thing with mental spells, deal mental damage to it, that's going to be its kryptonite and probably the key to winning against this monster. Has a might of 4, agility of 0, charisma 1, intelligence 0. Again, all of its abilities are in its might, with the rest of its stats being pretty puny, and this thing leaning heavily on its might score. Resistance, it will reduce 1 lightning damage, again, as I've explained before, just a little bit of extra padding to insulate this monster. Skills, athletics, intimidate, survival, nature, and awareness. They're all there. Senses with dark vision and blind sight. 2 languages of your choice. Currently, it has no features. I elected to not give this a frightful presence, but if you want to give this thing a frightful presence, that is an option that you can do as well. Actions. It has its standard 4 action points with a massive +6 attack and a and a save DC of 16, which will come in handy for its debris breath. Again, its speed is 4, so it's a little bit slower, so movement will be key for this thing. So you don't want to spend too many of your 4 actions moving around though. So there, once again, I do have a way to counterbalance that. Um, it has a bite attack with a reach of 2, does 3 piercing damage. I made this a usable once per round. That might not be terminology that will kind of exist on DC-20 monsters, so it's a little iffy, but I felt that was the best way to balance it against the claw attacks here. I considered making it a 2 AP attack, but I felt that just didn't make as much sense. I made it a little bit of a flourish that it can bite once and do as many claw attacks per round as it wants, and hopefully that's a little bit of a balancing factor. Speaking of balancing, it's debris breath. Don't have any kind of cooldown timer on this, so that's going to be a controversial decision. I don't know how the dungeon coach is going to do dragons in his system. As far as I've seen, I've not seen an example of one, so I don't know if it's going to be more of the recharge system that 5e uses. It most likely will be, or kind of the 1d4 round system that Pathfinder uses. But I felt that was just a lot of extra tracking, so I decided to just make its breath weapon a 3 action attack, which is hard to get off, and some turns you'll start with less than 3 action points, as you'll see below when we get to the reactions. If you do get the breath weapon off, though, it seems pretty damaging, so and quite powerful. So we'll see if that debris breath is too powerful because it's usable every turn, or if 3 AP is too much for it and it should just have some cooldown timer. I'd be curious to see people testing this. But speaking of the enhancing your attacks, we have a very interesting thing. We saw with the Pathfinder version that there was a charge that used 2 AP. Here with DC-20, we can make that a attack enhancement where it can apply to bite or claw. So if you've not used the bite yet, then you can do this charge ability with the bite, or you can just do it with a claw attack as well. So you can add 1 AP to the bite or claw to move 2 spaces before you do it, and add a +1 to that attack, which again will give you a higher chance of getting a heavy or critical hit. So that's a very cool part of the system to enhance the attacks like that. Finally, its reactions, because of course we need to give this thing a powerful defensive ability, and I did not go easy with it here. So it has one legendary action point. So normally when you use a reaction in DC 20, it eats into your action economy of your next turn, which I think is fabulous for this system and great for this monster, because the more it's forced to use defense, the less it will be able to use its offensive capabilities, which include its debris breath, but I wanted to give it a little bit of a buffer where it can be a little reactive and not do as much, which is important here because its wing block costs 2 AP to use. So the first time you use it, you can use 1 AP plus 1 legendary action point and still have 3 AP for your turn. You could use it a second time though and wing block twice in a round and only have 1 AP on your turn to attack with, but that might be a good move if everyone is blowing their stamina and their mana points in one round. You can wing block 2 different attacks. You'll have a little bit of a cooldown timer to get your AP back, but everyone will be also trying to recover their stamina or figure out what they're doing now that their biggest attacks have been blocked. But I've not mentioned what it does. The wing block. When a attack hits the dragon, it can increase its physical damage reduction by 2 for that attack. And remember, it starts with 1. So this means it's taking 3 less damage from a attack that it uses its wing block on. So this is quite a powerful reaction. And that is the Earthbound Stone-Wing Dragon. Happy Dragon Week, everyone. I'm really happy I was able to get this video up very last second at the final minute here. And I hope people enjoyed this content. I hope I can make more content like this. Thank you for checking this video and channel out. And I hope you have a great day. Take care.